What is good, Meat Boys? Yo, all our Golden Boy anime fans will have to let us know down below. Is Benito the Golden Boy Lopez the true UFC Golden Boy and not Edmund Shabazian? Because I feel like, Meat, that's what's up for grabs in this absolute bantamweight beef bash, right? Mario Bautista taking on Benito Lopez, the Golden Boy, who is 3-1 in the UFC, 10-1 overall. But he's a plus 245 dog in this one and is making a return after 40 months away, right? Like, this was a guy who was really clicking in 2019. I mean, most recently, that win over Vince Morales was probably Benito's best performance. But again, that was July 2019, and we haven't heard from him since. So it's going to be interesting to see what sort of Lopez arrives to the cage come Saturday. Like, is it one who has just been refining his craft the last few years, or is there going to be some serious cage rust, so to speak? Because again, this is a guy who was 3-1 in the UFC. His only loss is to Manny Bermudez, and that was via guillotine choke. And we know the submission arsenal that Bermudez has. So pretty impressive stuff from Benito. And he's taking on Mario Bautista, who fights out of Arizona. He's 4-2 in the UFC, a near 3-1 favorite in this one, and he's won 2 straight. I think I was most impressed with his most recent early light work finish over Brian Boom Kelleher, because I feel like Boom Kelleher is a solid levels test for anyone at 35, and for Bautista just to run right through him, easy work, and pick up that first round submission, I thought was a testament to the improvements that Mario Bautista has been making. And again, 4-2 in the UFC on a 2-fight win streak. His only losses are to Corey Sandhagen, where he got armbarred, and that was just a filthy finish by Sandhagen. And then he also got finished by Trevin Jones, which isn't ideal. Trevin Jones is kind of a mid-tiered fighter for sure, but on a 2-fight win streak and taking on a guy who hasn't fought in 40 months. You taking Bautista, or is the Golden Boy going to get this done?
Yeah, this is a great matchup. Mario should get this done. Usually I take this type of fighter. He's looking great. Like, I feel like we kind of respect Mr. Boom a lot. So the fact that he did what he did, I mean, what a great performance and a great statement for him. Glendale, Arizona, 29. I mean, slowly starting to peak, but I don't know. Something's telling me with those types of odds at a plus 200, plus 245 around there, I can't not go with the Golden Boy. There has to be one real Golden Boy, and there's about 20 on SureDog, and I'm hoping that Benito is the one. So I'm riding with the homie Lopez. He's 1-1 in his last 2, and he's going for 2-1. So I gotta take him. I think he's gonna get it done unanimous. It's either gonna be that, or he's going to absolutely get ragdolled and finished first round. That's how I kind of see it. So I'm hoping that Golden Boy could come through for Mr. Meat over here, because I like those odds. So I'm gonna be a DGen on this one.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it opened at plus 200, but all the action's been coming on Mario early. And the fact that Lopez is now plus 300, right? Like a 3-1 dog isn't bad value if you're bullish on Lopez returning and looking just like he did the last time we saw him. Because if the fighter who showed up in their most recent performance in 2019 arrives on Saturday, then I think that guy can absolutely can be competitive against Mario Bautista. But if you look over at Tapology, 91% is rolling with Bautista. Most of it is beige. There is a little bit of copper for the sub, a little bit of brown for the KO. Only 9%, however, is rolling with Benito, the Golden Boy. So do you think that if Bautista wins, there's any chance for a finish? Or are you bullish on Bautista if winning wins by decision?
Yeah, Golden Boy is kind of a decision king. He's got 5 decisions, 2 subs, 3 KOs. If he does get a finish, I would assume it's KO. And honestly, if Mario wins, I'm gonna assume it's a submission. I probably will check submission props for Mario, because it looks like that Benito is definitely prone to losing to submission since that's his only loss. So that's what I'll be looking at, but I do like Benito in this. I like him by decision, maybe KO.
Yeah, I feel that, and I don't know, at minus 300, it seems like a lot of juice for Mario Bautista. I mean, I think that Bautista is definitely noticeably getting better and better each fight, but there's so much uncertainty about what Benito looks like in this contest to where at minus 300, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak. So if you were to play, I think Lopez Dink on that plus 250, plus 300 dog is interesting for sure. For the pick, however, I got to roll with Bautista. I gotta imagine he'll get this one done. It wouldn't be the most surprising thing if Benito does steamroll him, but I like Bautista. likely to win by finish, to be honest with you. If it's better numbers for the KO versus the sub, then I'll probably be rolling with that KO because probably a coin flip as to if he does finish Benito Lopez, whether it's by KO or by sub. But I think he could crack him.
No, great fight, great matchup. Throw in the comments who you got. You going with Benny or you going with Mario?
Can't wait to get your take on this one. Real quick, shout out to our latest sub, Yvonne Teak. Appreciate you grilling and chilling with the Meat Boys. And very interested to hear me. Are you going to roll with Grant Dawson, aka KGD, who at 18, 1-1 is on an absolute tear, right? I mean, he essentially had one bad round against Ricky Glenn, and that netted him that majority draw. But beyond that, it's been win after win and a lot of solid competition that he's gone against, right? He took out our boy Juicy J, Julian Rosa, took out the Ultimate Fighter winner, Michael Trezano, who fights next weekend, and Meat Boy Minter Dinner, Leonardo Santos, and most recently against Jared Gordon, who is fighting Patty in December. So a lot of interesting wins there, a lot of good stuff from Grant Dawson, who keeps getting better, and he's fighting Marco Madsen, and some might argue that the O might stand for overrated. So do you think Marco Madsen is going to have the skill set necessary? I mean, we know this is the undefeated wrestler. The O stands for Olympian, right? This is a guy who wasn't just there, he was winning medals. So we know the kind of craft he has there. Will he have the stand-up chops necessary? Or do you not think that that'll even factor in? And Marco Madsen, just like he's been doing, takes down Grant Dawson and keeps him there. Who are you taking in this one?
Yeah, this is such a crazy matchup because clearly we have both two specialists in grappling. I mean, Grant Dawson has an insane amount of submissions. It's crazy for his record. And Mark Madsen, I mean, he's an Olympian. Dude's a legend. Dude's a goat. But he is 38 versus 28, so 10 years. So will the new, peaking, prime physique young killer get this done as a favorite, or is the OG still has enough, testes in the tank to get it done, and he's got enough experience to outclass this young lad? And I'm going to go with Madsen. Madsen's a freak of nature. He reminds me of Yoel Romero. So Madsen's got at least 5 more years until he's dust. And so I think Madsen's going to, pull out the veteran in him in the grapple world and take it on. I don't really see Grant being like, oh, this magical striker. Mark Madsen and Grant standing up might be pretty even. You could maybe argue Grant will be a little better, but I don't think it'll be that much better if it is. But I think Mark's just going to win wherever it goes, on the feet, on the ground. I would be very surprised if Grant submits him. That would just blow my mind. But it would make sense. He's a 2-1 favorite. So, with those kind of odds, with an absolute savage like Mark is, I have to ride with my boy the Olympian. So I have to take this. These odds are insane. You already know who I'm riding. Olympian, unanimous decision, or TKO finish.
Yeah, I feel you. Great stuff. Great points. Well taken for sure. And I think that if you are bullish on just what Marco Madsen has shown you thus far, then at plus 200, I mean, 2-1 for the Olympian seems pretty juicy for sure if you're bullish on Mark O. You touched on what this fight looks like when on the feet. I don't know. I kind of think that Grant Dawson will have the advantage. I think he's going to be faster than Marco Madsen on the feet. And I don't know. I can see a world where almost it looks similar to like Arnold Allen versus Calvin Kattar this past weekend, where Allen was definitely teeing off on Kattar pre-knee injury. And I don't know. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but it looked like Kattar was feeling something that maybe he wasn't used to, and I can see that being the case for Marco Madsen, but that would assume that Grant has continued to level up his stand-up game. I mean, I just know most recently against Jared Gordon, he did have some moments. I know he won by submission, but he had some nice moments on the feet for sure, so hopefully he can take those into this fight against Overguard Madsen. But if we look at Tapology, 65% is rolled with KGD, 35% is rolled with the Olympian, and it's basically beige on both sides. Do you think there's a world where Dawson gets a finish, or would you say it's more likely that Madsen gets a finish, if anyone?
Honestly, I think Madsen is going to get a finish, if anyone. I just don't see Dawson getting a finish. It seems his only way to finish is a submission, which I don't know, I just don't see it, and I don't see like if somehow Dawson out grapples Mark Madsen, that's just gonna blow my mind, and maybe he does get a KO on the ground or submission, but I just don't see Grant landing an absolute meat bomb on the feet, while I do see Madsen ragdolling Grant and showing him this is how you grapple, little bud.
Yeah, this fight's fun, right? Because we most might argue that Madsen probably has that grappling advantage, but maybe the MMA wrestling skill set of Grant Dawson is better than the sort of Olympic style that Marco is bringing. But nonetheless, in this one, I'm rolling with Grant Dawson. I just think he's going to have a decided advantage on the feet, and I think the fight is going to be on the feet longer than some might anticipate. I can just see Grant Dawson being able to stuff these repeated takedowns, and we've seen Marco kind of fade with his gas tank. So if he starts to fade in, mid round 2, late round 3, I can just see him like eating some body shots, getting picked apart on the feet, and ultimately Dawson getting a late finish. So I'm gonna roll with Grant Dawson. I like him to actually get the finish in this one. But let's see if you're right about Mark O. And then if he does, I'm going Dawson. But if Madsen gets this done, what's next for Marco Madsen?
What's next is I think they got to give him a top 5 fight ASAP. He's not getting younger. He needs to get maybe one more, or maybe, I mean, there's no way he's squeezing in for a title fight, right? But he's gonna have to get a top 5 fight. Maybe Demir. I would like to see Demir. Maybe, I mean, if it's not a top 5, then maybe Demir or the Georgia Viking. One of those guys. I think that would be epic. But yeah, I think they need to push him up ASAP. If he gets this done in a great fashion, if he just smashes Dawson, Dawson has plenty of shelf life, so they'll just keep throwing him through the ringer, just use him and abuse him. He's nowhere near title fight, even if he smashes Madsen. But Madsen has some hype, has the Olympian, all that little background, and he's 38, so they could push him if he gets it done in spectacular fashion, or they'll just we don't really care, we don't need you. You know how stacked 155 is. Get in line. Oh, you want a title shot? Get in line. That's what Dana's gonna say. So, time is not good for Mark. So, honestly, it wouldn't even surprise me if he retires if he wins. He's just old, and what else are they gonna do with him? There's so many insane fights that are probably way ahead of him for a title fight. So I just don't see him ever getting a title fight, to be honest, which is sad.
Yeah, he's definitely up there in age, but you gotta imagine that I don't know, I couldn't see an Olympian wanting to just exit with a victory. I would just anticipate him wanting to be a champ and taking it as far as it can go for sure. But we'll see. Maybe you put him against Gregor Gillespie and see who the better wrestler is, but Gillespie probably, won't answer the phone. So nonetheless, in this one, let us know in the comments who you're rolling with. Meat is going with Marco Madsen, Meaty Marco Madsen, and your boy's going with KGD. Let us know. It's the co-meet, and I cannot wait to get your perspective on this one, Meat Boy, because these are two guys that we obviously have a lot of respect for. Neil Magny, absolute veteran, taking on D-Rod, Daniel Rodriguez. And the last time we saw D-Rod, it was that confusing last-second shakeup, right? UFC 279. He ends up getting paired up against Lee the Leech Jin Liang, and I remember both of us were watching it live together, and we thought the Leech definitely did enough to win that contest. And I think a lot of people in the MMA community were singing a similar song, but nonetheless, D-Rod picks up the split decision and was able to continue his win streak, right? I mean, he picked up an easy work win over Kevin Lee before that. Kevin Lee's obviously a 55er that was fighting up at 70, trying to reinvent himself, and D-Rod put a squash to that immediately. And then he also has that finish over Preston Parsons and also beat Mike Perry. I mean, his only loss in the UFC, he's 7-1, was against Nicholas Dalby, who is always a tough levels test for anyone. So I'm interested to see if he has enough to take out Neil Magny, who impressively enough is making his 28th UFC appearance. He's 19-8. I mean, if he picks up a win, that's 20 victories in the UFC. And if it's by decision, he just extends his record of most decision finishes, or most decisions, I suppose, of all time in company history. So this is a guy, and they're not all bumps too, right? I mean, if you just scroll through Neil Magny, some wins over Tim Means, Carlos Condit, the Leech, Robbie Lawler, and then within the last year, he took out Jeff Neal, Hands of Steel, and Max Griffin, and both those guys, you can argue, are in the best shape we've seen them ever. So, what are your thoughts on D-Rod versus Neil Magny? Neil has made a living out of taking out guys that are just fringe top 15, top 20 guys. Do you think D-Rod is in that conversation as a fringe guy, or are you bullish on D-Rod maybe jumping into the top 15, maybe the top 10? What's the ceiling for D-Rod, and do you think he gets it done over Neil?
Yeah, this is such a great fight. I mean, props to the matchmakers finally giving Magny, another good matchup. Because if you look at those two recent losses, what do we see? S tier level of grapplers. And guess what? D-Rod is definitely no grappler. He's a scrapper. He's a boxer. He's got great cardio. I would say these guys fight very similar, except Neil might actually be more of a grappler. Well, he's definitely more of a grappler than D-Rod. And I'll be very interested to see if he actually tries to go for the takedowns or anything like that. I think D-Rod personally is gonna be too strong, too good takedown defense. We saw that versus Kevin Lee, and Kevin Lee's a real wrestler, so I don't see Neil being this like, oh wow, D-Rod can't do anything or get back up because Neil Magny's grappling so good. I just don't see that. The only way I see Neil maybe winning is somehow he just gets more points and puts on that crazy volume. But that's where I get conflicted because I go, oh, that's what D-Rod does. He's like Sean Strickland, just little punches, but they do enough damage and they gets the job done. So I gotta ride with D-Rod, especially if the odds get juicier. Plus 100, I'll probably fade this just personally for any bets. Maybe a decision, like depending on how the props are. But I will be picking D-Rod, and I'm hoping that the odds get even juicier because I think D-Rod should absolutely get this done. I don't think Neil's anything special. But then you look at the wins, so it's very conflicting on emotions on like who to really pick on this. But I'm gonna go with my first gut instinct, that's D-Rod. But yeah, pretty insane that Neil Magny smoked Max Griffin and Hands of Steel Jeff Neal. That's the most impressive.
Yeah, I mean, those are nice wins for sure. And if we're looking at just the particulars, one would expect, at least in my mind, like one would expect Magny to be the older guy, but he's actually going to be the younger, fresher fighter, despite having obviously way more professional experience and way more experience in the UFC overall for sure. But if we look at Tapology, 56% is rolling with D-Rod, 44 is rolling with Neil Magny. It's basically decisions. There's beige top to bottom for both guys. If anyone gets a finish, who's more likely, D-Rod or Magny?
Yeah, if anyone gets a finish, I would imagine it's going to be D-Rod. I don't see Neil Magny being able to finish D-Rod. D-Rod's a tough man. Like, it would be very surprising. But I don't know. I think this is going decision. I don't really see either one getting it done. But I would agree with Tapology. I think what it shows is exactly what it's going to be. Slight chance that Magny gets a sub. Very slight he gets a KO. And pretty small chance Rodriguez gets a KO. But most likely 90% decision.
Yeah, I buy that for sure. I think Tapology is onto it. I like this fight to go the distance, but I'm going with Neil Magny in this one. I just think that this is going to be too much of a levels test for D-Rod, and I don't know. I thought he lost that fight against the Leech, and if Magny was fighting the Leech, I mean, that already happened, and Magny made light work of him. So you hate to do MMA math, but the most recent D-Rod that we saw, I don't think is good enough to beat Neil Magny, and I think that the small apex cage might actually be big in this one. I anticipate Neil Magny being able to like close the distance. I mean, he's gonna have a 6-inch reach advantage. He's obviously the way taller guy too, so I can see him just pumping that stiff jab out there and actually having a couple good moments on the feet. Ultimately being able to close distance, and then I just see a lot of clinch work up against the cage, maybe working some takedowns as you touched on. I just like Neil Magny to have the more well-rounded MMA game. It's definitely possible that D-Rod sleeps in with a meat bomb, but we know historically Neil Magny's pretty difficult to get put out. So I'm going to roll with Neil Magny. I like him to honestly dominate this fight. I think he wins a 3-2-0 unanimous decision. Any last thoughts on this one, mate?
No, yeah. I 100% agree. It wouldn't surprise me if Neil gets this done, but if he can get it to the ground, yeah, this should be a lock for Neil. But if he can't get it to the ground, I could see him gassing out and D-Rod just putting on a pace and possibly close the case, So throw in the comments who you got, D-Rod or Magny.
This is a low-key great fight right here, Meat. And real quick, shout out to our latest sub. Appreciate you grilling and chilling with the boys for sure, and cannot wait to get your thoughts on this one. Nate Maness taking on Tagir Ulanbekov, and the first thing that jumps out to me is Nate Maness is making his flyweight debut, right? He's dropping down to 125, and historically, this is a guy who used to fight at lightweight. He fought at featherweight, he fought at bantamweight, and now somehow late in his career is expecting himself to make flyweight, and perhaps he does, but we'll see what he looks like, because most recently he lost to Umar Nurmagomedov, and obviously, that made sense that he lost to Umar. We know that Umar likely could be a future champ for sure. And he managed to go all 15 minutes, but it was one of those just like start to finish, clear, easy work victories for Umar. But before that, we can't ignore that Nate Maness was on a nice little win streak. I mean, picked up back-to-back performance of the night finishes, one over Luke Sanders, cool hand Luke, and the other against Tony Gravely, who sometimes picks up UFC wins. So some pretty decent performances there as an underdog in both too, for sure. He just ran into too much against Umar, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this one because Tagir Ulanbekov, I mean, you see the name, you might see Tagir, wow, only minus 210, but he's a fighter who I don't know if he can be honestly compared to like the other guys that run with him. I mean, he's not of the sort of Dagestani breed fighters. He's probably the worst. I mean, most recently he just got absolutely smoked by Tim Elliott, and although he did pick up some nice wins before that, Alan Nascimento isn't a bad victory and is kind of aging nicely. I do worry about the guy that showed up against Tim Elliott, especially as a 2-1 favorite in this one against Nate Maness, who will absolutely crack. We know he's an absolute dog and makes most fights, albeit not continuing that last one, but makes most fights close. So, are you taking Nate Maness in this one, or do you like Tagir at 13-2 as a 2-1 favorite? Who you got?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there on Tagir. Like, I don't know uh, what Tagir showed up the other night versus Tim Elliott, but I will not be riding with that guy because I think Nate Maness is going to get it done. I think he's going to KO him second round. I think it's going to be light work, and I love that he's an underdog. So I'm riding with the dog. You already know, once again, call me a degen, but I can't pass these odds when this should be a pick 'em, or maybe even Nate arguably should be the favorite.
Yeah, I'm with you all the way. I mean, he's going to have the reach advantage, he's going to have the height advantage, and I think he has the striking advantage as well. I mean, I have not been impressed with Tagir's like overall stand-up game, and Nate Maness has nice, crisp, tight boxing that might actually frustrate Tagir in this one. It's tough, we're breaking these down on Tuesday, and, we won't see them physically till later this week. I'm very curious to see what Nate Maness looks like at 125. Like, is he going to be absolutely sucked out? Not looking great, and maybe even a Tagir meat bomb can sleep a guy with that depleted of reserves, or is he going to be looking nice, peak, absolutely shredded at 25? I think we'll learn a lot for sure. But if this guy shows up and physically looks capable and just doesn't look all drawn out, I think I'm with you. I think he's going to get the W in this one. I think there's a lot of value at plus 200, and if we're looking at Tapology, I mean, he is getting 37%, so there are some sweaties that are rolling with Nate Maness, and there's even more brown for a Nate Maness KO than there is for a Tagir Ulanbekov KO. So a lot of the community seems to think that Maness will have that stand-up advantage. There is a little bit of copper for that sub Ulanbekov, though. Any chance this fight hits the mat, and if so, could you see Tagir picking up a sub?
Uh, no, I don't know. I really just don't see how this guy even wins, to be honest. I'm very surprised on these odds, but I'm going to try to capitalize on it. But, I mean, I guess we'll find out what the odds makers are seeing. I just don't see it.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe if this fight was at 135, maybe it would be more closer to a pick 'em, or he'd perhaps be getting a little bit more love. But you just wonder with that uncertainty at 25, perhaps that's factoring into the odds makers' decisions. But nonetheless, I'm with you. I'm going to roll with Nate Maness in this one. I like him to win by a finish. And again, pay attention to what happens later in the week. Check out to see if this fight even goes through. Right, this is one of those contests that I could see waking up tomorrow, checking MMA fighting, and texting you that the Tagir versus Nate Maness fight fell through because this just has disaster written all over it. But nonetheless, rolling with Meaty Maness for sure. I like him by finish. Any last thoughts? Are we sharp on this one?
I think we're a little sharp for this sizzle. But yeah, throw in the comments who you got. You taking Mayhem or Tagir?
Heavyweight meat floppers in this one. Meat cannot wait to break this one down. We got Chase Sherman, the Vanilla Gorilla, taking on Josh Parisian, who at 2-2 in the UFC is coming in off a nice recent win. It was a performance of the night against Alan Booty Dude, and while Booty Dude isn't the most impressive fighter on the roster for sure, it was clear that Josh Parisian made some advancements in his game. I mean, the fight before, and it wasn't that long ago, it was just in December of last year, he got absolutely smoked by Dontel Mays in a fight where he was just getting controlled on the ground. Dontel Mays was just beating the brakes off him essentially, and really made Dontel Mays look like a kind of all-star out there when in reality he's probably not. So it wasn't a great look for Josh Parisian, and before that he picked up that snooze fest split decision versus Rocky Martinez, a fight that was closer than it needed to be honest with you, and then dropped a unanimous decision to Parker Porter before that. So Josh Parisian, we know the backstory, right? This was a guy who was playing a lot of RuneScape, just basically just PKing in the Wildy for a long time, and then decided that he wanted to be a UFC fighter. So here he is, and he's taking on the Vanilla Gorilla, who, I mean, talk about a guy with ups and downs throughout his career. I mean, this is, no, believe it or not, his 14th UFC fight, and he's 4-9 in the UFC. So rarely do you see a guy amass 14 fights with such a putrid record. And he did come off a nice win over the Mountain Vandera most recently. And just like how Parisian did in his last fight, got a performance of the night bonus. So had lost 4 straight before that, though. So it's like, what are your thoughts on both of these guys? Like, are both of these guys back? Like, is Josh Parisian absolutely nasty off his performance of the night? And is Chase Sherman absolutely nasty off his? And this is just an absolute test for both these guys? Or is this just a battle of the bums?
You know, this really might be Battle of the Bums. I'm not gonna lie. But I don't know how Josh is still in the UFC. I don't know how he got to win his last fight, but I don't know how Chase got back in the UFC and totally redeemed himself. Honestly, I love this matchup. I think Chase is going to absolutely demolish Joshy Boy over here. I think Joshy Poo is going to get sent to BKFC, and Chase is here to stay. Chase put a big statement in his last fight. He was on a big fight win skid. I mean, losing skid, and then totally redeemed himself with his last performance. And so I was very surprised, very impressed, and I think he's got nothing to lose and nothing to worry about. And also, to be fair, if you look at his recent losses, he's fighting nothing but killers. Jake Collier looking great, Andrei Arlovsky was looking great in 2021, 2022 not so much. And Alexander Romanov, I mean, no shame in that one. So yeah, I think Chase is gonna get it done. I think he's got nothing to lose. I really like it, and I like that it's even odds, and I just favor Chase big on this one. I don't know how. I don't know. I just don't know how Josh is gonna get it done. Chase should be the faster, stronger, better fighter, but maybe Josh just hits him with an absolute meat bomb, and Chase goes night night. I don't know. This is definitely a battle of the bombs. Very curious to see how this ends.
Yeah, like one would think that, I mean, if we look at Tapology, right, 62% roll with Parisian, 38% roll with Vanilla Gorilla, and there's a lot of brown for that Parisian KO finish. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't really have insane punching power. He's in there like throwing spinning back fists and stuff. He's got a very unorthodox tool set for sure. And I don't know. I think for that many people to be bullish on a KO for Parisian, maybe they're anticipating some sort of groundwork and he can perhaps mount the Vanilla Gorilla, but I don't know. It's tough to imagine a situation where Parisian gets a KO, but 38% meanwhile, again, rolling with Sherman, and most of that is Brown for the KO. Do you think that Chase Sherman can win a decision in this one? Like maybe it's a snooze fest back and forth, both guys gas out early, and then one guy has to win those later rounds, and perhaps Sherman can win a decision, or do you think that his best pathway is by that KO finish? Yeah, I could see it for sure. Like I don't know. I go back and forth. I could see a world where somebody wins via brutal finish and likely early, just both dudes swinging absolute leather. But there's also a part of me that thinks that this could just be not that entertaining and goes 15 minutes back and forth. A lot of clinching, maybe even a lot of staring. You referenced Ngannou versus the Black Beast, where they're just looking at each other. I could see that going down for this contest. Not especially bullish on either fighter. In this one, shoot, man. I mean, did you pick Chase Sherman?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Josh Parisian. He's not good. He's not a good fighter, but neither is Chase Sherman. And I'm not sold on Chase Sherman having the power to go through the absolute RuneScape killer, Josh Parisian. So I'm taking Josh Parisian by decision. Any last thoughts?
No, this is a great matchup, great fight. I mean, who wins? Is it going to be the Vanilla Gorilla or the RuneScape OSRS Grandmaster Joshipu? Throw in the comments who you got. You taking OSRS or the Vanilla Gorilla?
Let's go, boys. It's the meat event, and it's the meat lock. You see the text, you hear the sizzle, and time to recoup from last week. Andrei Arlovsky, the only objective was to survive those first couple minutes. He definitely didn't, so it's time to start a new meat lock win streak in this one, and we think we have the play. It's Marina Rodriguez taking on Amanda Lemos, and in this one, I mean, we've been seeing the praises of Marina Rodriguez for a long time. When many were not bullish on Marina in certain spots, I like to think that we over at Meatboy MMA, we're pretty always bullish on this woman because if you look at her record, she's 16-1-2. She has 2 funky draws. Both could have been wins, and the only loss she has is to Carla Esparza in a split, very controversial decision. So although she has a record that doesn't look undefeated, we always make the case that it very well could be a 19-0 fighter that we're dealing with. And talk about someone who has to continuously keep proving herself. I mean, the UFC just refuses to give Marina Rodriguez a title shot, and every single time it seems like she's down. It's almost like she just wants to wipe out every woman in this division, and eventually her title shot time will come. And I think that's how she's approaching this one against Lemos, who we definitely have some respect for. I mean, she's 12-2-1. She has a lot of skills. Most recently, she beat Michelle Waterson, and that was an easy finish where you were getting some insane numbers for the like plus 400, plus 500 submission, which was very juicy against Michelle Waterson. But the fighter that we saw before that was against Jessica Andrade. It was a meat event opportunity. It was like the coming out party was how that story was being sold. And Lemos got absolutely smoked in 3 minutes. Standing choke. I mean, Andrade essentially just wrapped up her neck and choked her out without even needing to put her on the ground. So if she's getting standing subbed by Jessica Andrade, we got to believe that it's going to be bad news all around for Marina. So, or for Amanda via Marina. So what are your thoughts on how this one plays out? How are we getting this next meat lock, and how does Marina get this done?
Yeah, like you said, we've been pretty high on Marina Rodriguez since the start. I mean, she's an absolute savage, and people have been sleeping on her, but now people are starting to respect her. And this is a lock nonetheless. I mean, I think after she absolutely demolishes, I think actually KOs, TKO, somewhere around there for second round. Maybe late third, I don't know. It'll be interesting, but I think she absolutely demolishes Lemos, and then she is then hopefully gets a title shot, but knowing her luck, she'll probably have to fight like Rose or Zhang or somebody else to get to that title. But she's well deserving, and this is just another, nail in the coffin to get closer to that belt. So definitely a meat lock nonetheless, and I think she's just better everywhere. I think her grappling's better. I think her stand-up is way better. She's got the height advantage. Yeah, I think she's gonna be stronger, faster, everything. So the odds makers have it right. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 5-1 dog. To be honest, like that's how big of a killer Marina Rodriguez is. Lemos is kind of, she's kind of sucks. I mean, I think people are thinking she might be kind of good because she just beat Amanda Waterson, but like Waterson is just like BKFC right about now. So Marina Rodriguez has been killing nothing but killers lately. So a lock nonetheless.
Yeah, 100%. And if you kind of just scroll through the wins and losses for both women, I mean, Amanda Lemos, her best win is probably Watterson, maybe versus Angela Overkill Hill. But beyond that, it's a lot of fighters that you wouldn't get too excited over. Whereas Marina, I mean, there's a lot of killers on her record. I mean, Tisha Torres, Amanda Hebos, Watterson, and then most recently Mackenzie Dern and Yan Xiaonan. I mean, those are two very high-ranked victories for Marina for sure. So perhaps a title fight is around the bend next, or maybe like you said, they feed her to Rose. But either way, at minus 210, Marina seems like juicy beef in this one, and she's a proven main eventer, right? She's a proven 5-round fighter. She even got the fight of the night in that win over Mackenzie Dern, which went all 5 rounds, whereas Amanda Lemos has never fought in a 5-round contest. So do you think that the 4th and 5th round finish for Marina might be kind of sharp in this one? Like any world where Lemos, I mean, she's pretty stacked for the division. Any chance she fades late and Marina capitalizes?
Oh yeah, I could totally see her fading later. And then Marina absolutely just demolishes and outclasses her. I mean, she just has so much more experience and just so many more levels tested than Amanda has. Like you said, like her best win was Watterson, which is like, and that's not even peak Watterson. That's like end of the tail Watterson. So a lot of questions for that woman, for Lemos. But yeah, I think she's gonna get absolutely outclassed. This is kind of a gimme fight. That's how I look at it. And Marina's getting the title shot next.
Yeah, one would hope for sure. And again, as mentioned, you see the text going for that 63rd overall, and she's a minus 210 favorite. We'll be throwing down 315. It's going to net 150, kickstart a new meatlock streak, and then head into next week, which is absolutely stacked with bangers, ready to continue a meatlock streak for sure. So, any last thoughts? I like Marina. I like her by finish. I could maybe see this going 5 rounds and her winning a decision, but I don't know. I think that she might find a way to get a finish in this one, but nonetheless, meatlock for sure. Any last thoughts?
No, great fight, great matchup. Can't wait to get some meat on this one. And I'm very curious to see the props on the under 4.5 because I think those might be some juicy odds. So definitely stay tuned, check those out, and throw in the comments. Are we crazy? Are we off on this one? Or are we back on the meat and we're, on my